Was this happiness? Happiness had come to him on a bare, rocky island without any kind of warning. He hadn't done anything to bring it about. Hey everybody, thank you for watching Leaf by Leaf. Today we're talking about Tarjei Vesaas, The Birds. Whew. This is a powerful book and it moved me. I mean, emotionally stirred and moved me, not once, but several times. Before I really get started, I just want to say thank you to all of Scandinavia for existing in all of your splendor and glory. I work for a Swedish company I have since I was 18 years old. So exactly half of my life now has been spent at that company. And as part of that, I have had the great pleasure of going to Sweden many, many times, mostly Gothenburg. And I've made many great friends there in Sweden. Just such a lovely culture. And pretty early on, I was able to learn and constantly employ the phrase, Jag förstår inte. Anyhow, to the book. Tarjei Vesaas is Norwegian. This is the first time I've read any of his work. People have been foisting him on me relentlessly. Now I see why. It's been a while, maybe since I read Stoner a couple of years ago, that I've been emotionally moved in quite this way. Really, it has strong affinities with the children's book, The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein. It's just one of those books that wounds you and you know that you'll never recover from what you just read and experienced, but you're thankful. I want you to imagine that Hermann Hesse, Henry David Thoreau, and J.A. Baker got together and collaborated and then took a character out of a Faulkner novel and then it went through the sieve of Vesaas's poetic mind. And there you have The Birds. It's a very simple story. It brings to mind, just like again, allusion to Faulkner's A Sound and the Fury, which is itself an allusion to Shakespeare's Macbeth. It brings to mind the fact that life is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury signifying nothing. However, with Vesaas, we see that there is much to be signified, even if the tale is told by what we would call an idiot. There are two chief characters, brother and sister, Mattas and Hege. Mattas is enigmatic. Something has happened to him that has caused a mental aberration. We may, by the end of this book, however, call it a mental enhancement. But he's very excitable and mercurial, and he has a sensitivity to life, and especially nature, that other people just don't get. And he's aware enough, he's socially aware enough to pick up on cues that they just don't understand him. Hege is his older sister. She is the stoic sister who, in the absence of the rest of their family, she has had to bear the brunt of the homemaking and money earning. She does this by knitting sweaters endlessly on their front porch. And she's sort of vacillates between exasperation and sympathy when it comes to her younger impaired brother, Mattas. Mattas dotes on her. He loves her. And so when eventually a third figure, a lumberjack by the name of Jorgen, is introduced into the household, this is where we get the theme of the fragility of interpersonal relationships. And essentially Mattas's world and his connection to his sister is completely lost. And that's pretty much the story. You have these two. Mattas tries to go out and earn money so that he can help out there at the household with his sister, but it's pretty much hopeless because of his limitations. Eventually, his sister Hege gives him the idea to become a ferryman, meaning, take this little boat and see if there are people on the other side of the lake whom he can ferry to the other side to make a little bit of money. And that is actually how the lumberjack, Jorgen, gets introduced into the household, which causes all kinds of calamity. Again, Mattas is a beautifully drawn character. We get chiefly his point of view throughout this whole book. And there's actually a theme of doubling and mirroring. Over and over, Vesaas uses the simile of the lake surface being like a mirror. And there are also two trees that Mattas himself associates with his sister and himself. And he calls them Mattas and Hege with a hyphen between the conjunction there. So it's Mattas hyphen and hyphen Hege is how it's represented in here. And from the first chapter to the second chapter, Vesaas does something technically beautiful here. There are several technical flourishes, usually to do with a perspective jump or a jag in verb tense. And I'm leaving it up to the translators, Michael Barnes and Torbjorn Stovrun, to have portrayed this the way that Vesaas intended in the original Norwegian. But we open up in the first chapter. It starts off with Mattas looked to see if the sky was clear, blah, blah, blah. Then he said to his sister, Hege. So we start off in the very first paragraph of the first chapter with the proper names Mattas and Hege. Then, all of a sudden, in the beginning of the second chapter, it's like this quick perspective jump, like the camera angle pops out. And it starts off with brother and sister were sitting on the front steps outside the simple cottage. And it's just, I've never seen anything like that before. And it jarred me because, starting off, and these chapters are short, so it happens really quickly. We see that this jump from proper names to their roles is almost like doubling or mirroring of themselves that Mattas has imputed to the two trees across the lake. All of a sudden, it jumps to the perspective of those two trees looking back at them. And this doubling and mirroring will happen all throughout in beautiful ways. It doesn't take much time. What you could say is really going on with Mattas, and what we could really refer to his condition or difference from everyone else as being is that he is a true poet. He seems to be, just like I said, J.A. Baker, the Peregrine. He seems to be in that cycle of metamorphosis, becoming one with nature. But then there's constantly that revelatory feeling on behalf of the reader that for me, I got over and over when I read such Hermann Hesse books as Siddhartha. Because there's lots in the way of being against technology and industrial revolution. There are lots of references to big machines taking over and cars stirring up dirt everywhere and almost running people over. Mass production is put on display as something harmful to nature and really against nature. This is why Mattas could be drawn straight from Henry David Thoreau's journals or parts of Walden. Everyone is speeding along and staying completely occupied with things that to Mattas don't matter at all. They're just not getting it. They're missing everything. At any point, you're just waiting for Mattas to declare in a single line chapter, "My sister is a fish." For Mattas, words have a taste and a texture. For Mattas, nature is laden with symbols and premonitions of what is to come. The story is so simply told, but yet also wrapped in simple symbolism that would actually make this a great classroom book. For example, the symbol of the stone and the stones. It appears over and over again. Stones over the eyes, representing death. But then also the stone on the woodcock, which to me represented Jürgen and Hege. And so the pure poet is evolving, while at the same time metamorphizing into nature around him. Yet everyone on the outside can't see this. Words from other people are uttered in a hurry and without thinking. But words are so precious to Mattas. It says, this gave him another opportunity to use one of those words that hung before him, shining and alluring. Far away in the distance, there were more of them, dangerously sharp. Feeds me, feeds me. The word had a bitter taste. It was like chewing the bark of an aspen tree. Yet Mattas longs for touch and for connection, especially with the feminine. And it makes sense on one level because he is being raised by his sister, whom he adores and cherishes. But he sees and starts to understand that there are different levels of relationships. which is very tough for him. But he has learned that this one boyfriend and girlfriend with whom he works pulling turnips, he refers to them as sweethearts. And when she touches him, he blurts out, "It was almost like touching an electric fence." Yet, in contrast to those sensitivities of Mattas, her boyfriend was washing his hands nearby too. And when he'd finished, he put his arm around her as if it were the most natural thing in the world. So again, Mattas is just seeing this moment of a boyfriend throwing his arm around his girlfriend as just taking things for granted, when for him, the touch of her hand was like touching an electric fence. Towards the middle of the book, there's another one of these technical flourishes. It uses these single sentences set off into their own paragraphs that are also fragments to lend it, to give lots of visual space around it, and that helps lend its impact. But note, when I get to this third paragraph, I'll put a pause between each of these three short paragraphs. Note the omission of the subject from this fragment. Now it is night. What can you do when everyone around you is strong and clever? Will never know. So that will never know is set off by itself and devoid of subject. So we immediately ask, who will never know? And we can hear Vesaas say back to us, exactly. So intense was the emotional impact of this story on me, and the heightened sensitivities of this poet trapped in a harsh world of human ignorance, that as I got to the last chapter, chapter 47, I literally had to take a deep breath, steeling myself for what I knew was to come. Karl Ove Knausgård says that Tarjei Vesaas is the best and most interesting Norwegian writer after the Second World War. His language is so sensitive, so open to his characters' minds and the landscapes they inhabit, that it gives form to that space between people and other people, between people and nature, the space where our lives unfold. The enigmatic character that Vesaas has given us in Mattas is another embodiment of a character who realizes that there is an epistemological barrier between people that causes us not to be able to interact bare soul to bare soul. And this profoundly disturbs Mattas. Its complexity is rendered with the simplicity of poetic beauty that only a true poet, such as Vesaas was, could pull off. This book should be read with reverence and openness. I guarantee you, you will not recover from this book, and you will be forever thankful.